everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and here is video 1 to kick off my Halloween card making series, which has been so highly requested. A lot of you that are familiar with my videos know that I started doing these a few years ago. Absolutely love them, and then just life kind of got in the way the last couple of years, so series kind of went on the wayside. So I am very excited to be back, and especially doing the Halloween series, because again, if you've been watching my videos, if you know me, I love making Halloween cards. Don't know why. We're not big on really huge on celebrating Halloween, at least not in this household, but yeah, I love making Halloween cards. So for today's set of cards, I pulled out some Canson XL watercolor paper, and as I was cutting it down, I was like, ooh, I've got enough to make 3, so why not? So I taped all 3 pieces down onto some masonite board, and I have it the smooth side up. No reason why I chose the smooth side, I just did. So I taped these down, just lightly taped them because I was just playing around. I wanted to just add some color and see what would happen. So I'm using my Mission Gold watercolors, and I picked out Halloween colors. Obviously I had some orange and some green and some purple, and then I threw in some pink because I could. So I started by just adding clean clear water to the backgrounds, and then just like kind of dropping in the color and not really mixing it too much, especially because some of the colors I choose, which you'll see on this third panel, aren't meant to really go together. Like if I tried mixing them, they could really muddy and turn into a mess. I just kind of let them do their thing and blend into each other a little bit, but didn't really mess around with them too much. Mostly I just wanted to kind of get the color down, let it dry, and then see how it looks, because that's the thing with watercolor, and I've said this in past videos. I always need to work on my patience with watercolor because I have zero patience. I don't have enough time to make cards, so I want things done like yesterday. And watercolor, you can even see already on this left-hand one how it's totally changing as it dries. So that's where you have to have the patience, because it looks completely different dry than it does when it's wet. So this one I did add a little bit more color to, the center areas of each, but I didn't mix them because that green and the orange and the green and purple could totally go ugly. So set those aside so they could dry. And while they were drying, I'm going to work on my main images. And I pulled out, this is the My Favorite Things Frightful Friends stamp set and coordinating die set, which is absolutely adorable. I showed it in a recent haul video. I was so excited when I saw these little characters. They're adorable. That's all I have to say about them. So I've got more. I had all these random scraps because I've been doing so much random watercoloring lately. So I'm using these scraps up and lined up the stamps with the dies, which I've shown in many videos. I've also done a separate specific quick tip video about lining up stamps and dies. So I did that with these, with just the characters. There's like a bunch of stamps in this set with the coordinating dies, but I just wanted the 3 main images. So I inked those up with Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink and ended up stamping it multiple times there to get them stamped cleanly. That's where the Misty comes in so handy. So, because especially stamping on watercolor paper, because, it's got that little bit of grit and texture to it. So I did that a couple times and then set that aside. And then I pulled out the Grave Situation stamp set and the coordinating dies, because these all kind of work together. And did the same thing, lined up the stamps with the dies, and then I ended up stamping the images onto 2 pieces of watercolor paper. So I've got 6 images all together. So I've got doubles of everything. And originally my reason for doing doubles was 1, because I had the extra cardstock sitting here, and 2, I wanted to experiment with the colors I was going to use. So I just had both. So it's like, okay, if my first one doesn't turn out, I can use the second one and get it the way I want it. Especially for these little guys, because I decided to color all their skin kind of that green sort of a tinge, even though they're not technically all, zombies or whatever. But I just thought, I'm like, that'd look okay. So I was like, I mixed up my white and had a little bit of green in it already from a previous project. So just did that and applied that to my image, and I was actually kind of happy with it. So the further along I got with this, I was like, you know what? I'm going to use all these images on 3 cards. Why not? Go big or go home. So I'm using a silver size 2 brush for most of this watercoloring, because he's got, a little bit more detail areas. And I started with all their skin, so I did that kind of pale whitish green sort of color. And then I mixed up sort of a gray color and started adding that under their eyes and then in shadowy areas, and I applied it rather heavily. I didn't want it to blend out too much because I thought that just kind of gave them that more, deadly appearance. So did that with all of them. Didn't bother trying to blend it out or anything. I kind of wanted this all to be more messy. More so because I know a lot of you are like I used to be, struggle a lot with the messiness and going outside the lines. But the one nice thing too, though, about intentionally being a little bit messy and a little bit imperfect is it goes faster. You don't have to work so hard about staying in the lines and, you know, it being so perfect. When it's a little bit messy, you can go a little bit faster, which for me is perfect. So once their skin was dry, I went on and did all their hair and parts of this little Frankenstein's costume and whatnot. And that's also the nice thing about working on so many images at once is by the time I'm done the last image, I can go back to the first one and everything's dry, because that's another, you know, like I said, patience is my issue. So this way I'm not sitting around waiting for anything to dry. Although really, I can't, in the end, I spent quite a bit of time watercoloring, like everything, doing all the watercolor. I think probably altogether took a good hour or something like that. I didn't time myself because I just came back to it, you know, in spurts between dealing with the kids and whatnot. So whenever I had a few free minutes, I'd come back and do a bit of watercoloring. So I did, for her little wrap dress, whatever you want to call it, I mixed some of that same kind of grayish color and dropped in a bit of purple to get that kind of mottled look. And then just kind of went in and adding colors that would go with those backgrounds I had created earlier. So that's where that kind of blue color came in. And then just obviously Halloween colors, so the purple and the bright green and the orange. And I didn't bother going back after I was done each like section. I didn't go back in and add any more layers. You know, you could really go all out and, you know, definition and all that and add layers of watercolor, but I didn't bother with that because I thought it looked cute as is. So for the gravestones, after doing that, the dresses, I got the idea to do that for the gravestones as well. So I added that kind of gray. It was basically like the watered down black watercolor. And while it was still wet, that's when I dropped in that sort of pink color and then the purple and then the green. So just to kind of give it that cool bit of color and definition. And then the crow I just did with black, and my camera battery at that point had died. So I went off and did something else, charged the battery, and then came back to filming the rest of these cards. So by now, all these backgrounds have dried. You can see they look completely different than they did when they're wet. They look much better dry than they do wet. And of course, as always, I'm obsessed with adding the splatters. So I mixed up some more black watercolor on just an acrylic block and just flicked a larger brush across it. I think I'm using a size 4 brush this time. Oh, and in the beginning on the backgrounds, I was using a really big size 12 brush. So for this, I'm using a size 4 brush and just mixing up the watercolor on my acrylic block and flicking it down. My protective sheet there was a Chuck's. I mentioned that in a previous video. It's just a plastic backed paper towel basically, which I am loving for watercoloring. I have a ton of it on hand. I do link to it. You can get it through Amazon. I got mine from a medical supplier, but I do link to it in the supplies. So after I was done the splatter, I set those backgrounds aside again to dry. And then I went on to die cut all of my images, and this is where lining them up with the dies made my life so much easier. So I can die cut everything in one pass. So it just took a couple passes to die cut all my images. And then these backgrounds, when they were dry, I started trimming them down. And my original plan was to trim them down just slightly smaller than an A2 card. And then I got thinking, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to trim them down even more so that I'll be able to add a border when I actually finish these cards. So I started trimming them down to about roughly 3 3/4 by, I think 5.5 inches. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, 5.5 by 3 3/4. So once I was done with that, I'm going to start creating my actual card fronts. So this time I pulled out my VersaFine Onyx Black ink. This one, and I could have used this ink for the original stamping of all the images. I just wasn't thinking, I don't reach for this ink very often, but it's perfect for stamping stuff like this over top of all this watercolor and everything else, because this ink stamps so black and so perfectly. It's just gorgeous. My only peeve with it is it does smear when you stamp over things like this, or if you stamp it onto like colored cardstock, like when later on I'm going to stamp on the inside of my cards. And same with these sentiments. I stamped them with this too, and it can take forever to dry. That's another reason why I don't reach for it as often, because I'm moving fast. I'm not paying attention. I smudge things constantly. I ended up with quite a bit of ink on my fingers. Thankfully, with all the splatters and the mess I already had made on all these, you don't see any areas where I smudged some ink. So I stamped the little fence with that ink, and then I stamped all the sentiments onto the gravestones. And then there's a little bat stamp in the Frightful Friends, so I'd stamped those on all the backgrounds, and I've shown this again in previous videos. This is basically how I like mass produce So I do everything in steps so that these go faster. And then I had to do it. It might have been a little bit extra busy of a step, but I had to add this Doodlebug Spiders washi tape. It was sitting here. I've been dying to use it because it's so cute. So I was like, I'm gonna just add it to all of these. So I did, and then I added just a little piece of vellum as well, just to soften it a tiny little bit. And then started adhering all of my images. So I decided to put one character and one gravestone on the front of each of these. And the gravestone I adhered flat with some Tombow Monomulti. And then the character I popped up with some foam tape. So got that into place. And the sentiments I'd all done, I think off camera, maybe my camera battery died, who knows. But all of those I just stamped onto some black cardstock with Simon Says clear embossing ink and embossed them with detail white embossing powder. And then just trimmed them all down with my paper trimmer. And then I adhered all those into place on the cards with foam tape as well. And this was why I had trimmed down those backgrounds. I grabbed some, my favorite things. This is the Dots and Stripes Neutrals pattern paper pack. And the black and white diagonal stripe I thought would be perfect with these cards. So I added that to my card base, which is just some gray cardstock. And all my card bases were 4 1/4 by 11 and scored at 5 1/2. So they're all top folding A2 size cards. So I adhered the strip flat to the card base, and then all those watercolor panels I had adhered with foam tape. And then to finish off the inside of the cards, my original plan was I was just going to stamp, you know, those little characters with, you know, a light gray ink, whatever. But since I had all these watercolor pieces and they weren't wrecked from my experimenting, I decided to create like scenes on the inside too. So this was technically like way overboard. I wouldn't normally do this, but one, it's, you know, I'm back at it with the series. It's Halloween. I was having so much fun. So these cards got like the royal treatment. So I adhered the remaining gravestones and characters, and then I stamped a sentiment and stamped the bats, added more of that spider washi tape because go big or go home. I had so much fun making these cards. This was just a blast. I am very excited to be bringing back this series. I cannot wait to be posting more and more Halloween videos. They will be random, just an FYI. I won't post them like every single day. I'm just going to fit them in amongst everything else. So I will, though, post links on my blog and stuff every time I do a new one. So everything will be consistent. I'll do a playlist here on YouTube, all that fun stuff. So as always, there will be links below the video to my blog post with links to all the supplies used, all that fun stuff. So check that out below if you're interested. Thank you all so much for watching, subscribing, thumbs upping, and commenting on my videos. I absolutely appreciate the support more than words can say. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.